So let's pray. Dear God and Heavenly Father, we thank you for this wonderful day you've given unto us. We thank you for your unmerited favor upon us, and as professionals, we gather here today to have engagements and develop our knowledge. Oh Lord, we know that yours is the desire for us to achieve greatness and to be successful in our endeavors. Even as we begin this session, we commit it unto you, and may it be successful according to your will, O Lord. I pray those trusting in God's name. Amen. Okay. So I'll just take you through the profile of our able speaker today. Our speaker is Ferdinand Okoth Tieno, currently a lecturer at Strathmore University Institute of Mathematical Sciences. So Simon, could you confirm if all you are able to see my screen?
Yes, your screen is visible and we can also hear you.
Okay, so I'll just give you a brief bio of our able speaker. Ferdinand is a financial economist specializing in financial modeling, risk modeling, and forecasting financial markets. Currently, is a lecturer at the Institute of Mathematical Sciences at Strathmore University. He is also the immediate former dean of the same institute, a position he held until 31st August last year. He is also a director at Mahiri Quantfin, a boutique quant advisory firm based in Nairobi. And before joining Strathmore University and Mahiri, he was a corporate finance manager at KPMG Kenya. He has held various financial consulting appointments both in the public and private sector across Africa throughout his career. In this capacity, he has heavily been involved in financial modeling and risk modeling. Currently, he is pursuing his PhD in finance, majoring in asset pricing from the University of Cape Town, South Africa, under the tutelage of Professor Nicholas Biekpe. He also holds a master's degree in financial markets from Moi University and a first-class bachelor's degree in finance from Maseno University. Ferdinand is a certified public accountant of Kenya and a level 3 candidate of the CFA program. His research mainly focuses on cross-cutting issues in asset pricing, financial market microstructure, and quantitative risk management. Various research of his have been published in peer-reviewed journals, including Financial Analyst Journal, the Journal of Financial Mathematics, Research in International Business and Finance, and Emerging Markets Finance. Ferdinand is a professional member of various bodies, including ISPAC, the CFA Society of East Africa. He's also an associate member of Global Association of Risk Professionals, GAP, and is an associate member of the Society of Financial Econometrics. Yes, so that's a solid profile of our speaker there. And I guarantee you this will be an amazing session. So let's tune in and be attentive for what our able speaker has for us this afternoon. Yeah, so Ferdinand, if you're in the room, I'll like to welcome you to present to us what you have this afternoon.
Thank you, Christopher. I'm here. Just confirm you can hear me.
Yes, I can hear you clearly.
Very good. If you can allow me to share my screen as well, and I'll show my video just for a while so that people can see who is speaking. So this is Ferdinand. If you have never met him, you know, given what I do with Capable, ISPAC, and whoever, maybe I have met several of us here. So, and kindly allow me to share screen.
Ferdinand, confirm if you can be able to share.
Can you just confirm that? Yes, I think we can.
Okay.
You can see the screen.
Yes, yes.
Great. So welcome to this session. Usually it's a very short session, and therefore I'll try and keep my talk short so that we can focus on the discussion points. Once a profile like that has been read, someone might think it's expertise falling from somewhere else, but this is a very, can I say, a very fluid topic that I think the best way we can handle it is to invite conversations around it. How have you done it? What is the governance action you have put in place, and what experiences can you share with the participants? So I'll try and leave a lot of it to conversation later on in the next. So I intend to present maybe in the next maybe 30 minutes and leave 30 minutes to open Q&A and open sharing of experiences. And first of all, Happy New Year to all of us. I think we are still in that dispensation. You can say Happy New Year. It's a year starting after very many challenges. So if we can all say Happy New Year on the chat, and even if you can unmute and tell each other Happy New Year, I think it will be great. And just to thank God that we are here today. So feel free, take the next 1 or 2 minutes to say hi to people on the chat, Happy New Year, and all those kindly. And see only Calvin wants to wish people Happy New Year. Okay, very good. So let me quickly jump into the objective of the session and take it forward from there. Like I've said, this is a very conversational and fluid topic, and therefore, at any point, feel free to raise your hand. We'll be monitoring. So if you have anything to say, anything to comment, kindly, it will be very valuable as we go along. So I will wish that in the next 1 hour, we are able to define what data governance is. It's a topic that hasn't shaken root so much, but what is data governance? And consider an example of a data governance framework. We have a good example given by the SAS. So SAS has given a good framework we can speak through and just see what are the components of the data governance framework you could consider. And then what are the components of a typical, forgive for that typo, typical data governance structure? How does it look like? And if you are to implement one, how will it look like? Then what are the drivers of data governance excellence? If you wanted to have one that is excellent, how can you do this? And finally, where do we start or where do we begin if we want to put a data governance framework in place? So, and someone might think that data governance is a topic that is just appearing because of the advent of data science and data analytics or business analytics. But if you think about it, data governance has been here since time immemorial. During the technology boom of the 1980s, obviously, there was need for good information during those days. And therefore, there was form of data governance, even if it was not known by that name. The collapse of known or renowned companies like Enron pushed the requirement for corporate information and good corporate information. What good corporate information is really subject to definition even today, but it just meant that organizations needed enough data and information that can be disclosed to regulators, can be disclosed to stakeholders. Look at issues like Sarbanes-Oxley Act, especially for issues of financial institutions, requiring executives to personally be responsible for data driving their businesses. And I can't list everything that has actually pushed data governance. But if you think about the advent of issues in accounting like sustainability reporting. If you were to do sustainability reports today, you need loads and lots of data in places you never imagined, far away from financial data, if you may think of it that way. And so data governance has been there. The requirement for it has been there, and it continues to grow. And if you think about now the increasing requirement for data analytics, the increasing issues of Internet of Things, big data requirements, new regulations, including expected credit loss models, issues of compliance, including general data protection regulations, and even issue of data protection acts in different countries require that you really need to think about the subject a bit more deeply than we have been. And therefore, even as we think about data governance, we must know that we are dealing with a very fluid situation that is changing every day because of changing data loads and changing requirements, including regulation. Just before I picked this call, 3 minutes to joining in, I was handling an IFRS 9 call, expected credit loss model call. And as we combed through that conversation, I realized, wow, I'm just handling a data issue that I'll be speaking about in the next few minutes. Because right now, if you're doing issues like expected credit loss, you need to think about how has 2020 been different from the previous historical years we used to build IFRS 9 models, and what data do we need to generate to convince our stakeholders, including audit, that really what we are doing makes sense for the year 2020 provisions. And so I think we're in a very fluid environment where data needs to speak, but as data speaks, we should not approach it in an ad hoc way, the way we have been doing. Now, despite that growth, the efforts of data governance have often failed. They haven't seen any fruit or seen even the light of day. And why? One of the reasons is the definition of data governance. Have we defined data governance properly? Do we know it? Or do we think it's just a set of rules and frameworks and policies that must be followed? Or should it be elevated to the issues of strategy, issues of integration with the business and economic world? And most often, business executives and managers look at data as an IT issue. And therefore, anyone not in IT is not really interested in what data is. And we think that, oh, data is an IT issue. Yet we generate a lot of data from different departments, HR, finance, manufacturing, operations, customer care, and all those. So there is so much data that we have in the different domains, so fragmented domains within organizations, and yet we take the data question to the IT department. And unfortunately, most of the time, organizations are not integrated in a way that IT has been seen to be integral. So they are seen as these guys who sit somewhere in that other room that should take care of data, and us guys don't know anything they do other than come and sort out your passwords, your data, your whatever it is. But I think given the increasing need for data governance, there is need for integration of IT into all the operations of the organization. And being a governance issue, then it means that the unique culture of the organization must be taken into account. And I think when I speak matters culture, it really means a lot to me, given when Christopher was going through my profile, we know I teach at Strathmore University. And one of the things that I appreciate about the institution is for instance, I keep saying, I actually don't need to negotiate with a student on whether they'll do an exam or not because they didn't attend class. The culture helps me sort out that. So they even feel embarrassed to ask me, Ferdinand, I didn't attend class and I need to do an exam. Because the culture has been set. If you didn't attend class, sorry, we have no conversation with you. You go ahead, someone else will sort you out, or you repeat the unit and it's not my problem. So yet, and I'm not saying this is not true in other organizations, but when systems and culture has been put and inculcated in every way you do things, some conversations are easier, especially data conversations. And organization structures are also too fragmented, such that data units are not seen as the mainstay. And probably this is changing slowly, and therefore you can see a lot of data being used in domains and even in the data departments. And sometimes data governance is viewed as an academic exercise. And who is best to speak about academic exercises than me who teaches? Because sometimes we think that this unit, it was for me to pass the exam and that was it. And so we think data governance can also be taken that way, where you think it is some event that will come and then it will end. Yet it is a process that will need to be enshrined within the organization. And therefore, it's not anything that data governance is finished. It is here to stay. Data governance needs to improve every time. And so we can't even have a way to say that now this is where we started, this is where we have stopped, and therefore we have succeeded. So we need to view it in a wider perspective as a process, continuing to improve every other day. And sometimes the knowledge sits with existing structures and yet we overlook them. So maybe you already have maybe a business analyst position, or maybe you have HR position that already know the issues that you need to deal with, but we often overlook them when we employ a data analyst. So the data analyst keep running without really consultation with these other existing structures. And execution lacks because, again, data has not been managed in a structured way. It is really in very fragmented ways. So finance deals with their own data, risk deals with their own data, HR deals with their own data. We don't see the relationships that actually exist within this. And it's also very difficult to measure return on investment on these issues of data governance. One of the conversations that is difficult to have is someone asks you, these data scientists that sit somewhere in a small room somewhere, they're spending a whole day doing whatever they do, but we don't see the value they add to the organization. And this has been the case most of the time when data analysts have been employed, because sometimes they are on their own, alone. They sometimes don't know how to start even consolidating the data for the organization until the executives start seeing some insights that they bring on board. They never actually see what is the return on investment that we're actually making in this data analysis or even data governance and even systems. And the key resources that would have actually helped with the question of data governance are already overloaded, including people. And therefore, they can take on additional governance activities within the organization. If you look at the committees that exist already, or even board committees that exist already, they're already stretched. And so starting to add them an additional role of data governance becomes a bit difficult. But anyhow, we will think through how we can deal with these failures. Now, what is data governance? What is it? Probably we can use the chat so that we are all involved. If anyone wants to define what data governance is, you can put on chat, or you can raise your hand and we have a conversation. So far I've spoken like for, say, 8 or so minutes about data governance, but what is it? What's this data governance thing? Feel free, you can define it on the chat, you can raise your hand. I see we are 39 participants. Surely one of us should be able to say something. Anyone? I can volunteer people because I can see. Okay, yes, Christopher has said something. Processes around use, consolidation, protection of data. Okay, keep the conversation coming or going. Alvin says process by which organization protects data. One more definition. Maybe Alvin, do you want to speak about your definition? Alvin Atieno? Is Alvin here? Okay, maybe as we continue, Alvin will speak up. So, data governance has been defined as the organizing framework for establishing strategy. So again, let's underline framework, underline strategy, objectives and policies for corporate data. And so realize I'm distancing myself from this whole question of big data, data science, and all those. Any data within the organization is data that needs to be organized within a meaningful way so that we can have value for it. And so, Alvin, okay, thank you. You say your mic has a problem. Marcella has also added a voice to it, the question of access. But you can see that all the definitions that have come so far are bits and pieces of data governance that we need to expound on. So they're just part of data governance, because data governance is a bit wider. It's a whole framework for establishing strategy, objectives, and policies for the corporate data that we have and we intend to use so we can harness value out of it. And so the pieces of data governance, including policies, including guiding principles and operating procedures on data, will give notice to all stakeholders and let them know, okay, that we value our data as an asset in this organization and this is how we manage it. This is a very nice quote that I got, that you're actually stamping authority and telling your stakeholders that you value your data as an asset in the organization. And that is how you manage that data. So for us to appreciate or the value of data governance is to know that what we want is to get insights that will add value to the organization using data. Okay, so the whole framework of policies, guiding principles, operating procedures will form data governance. And there is a good schematic here. Sorry, it's a bit too big here, but I'll just speak about the key issues. So SAS gives an overall data governance framework, and they speak about the question of what actually drives data within this organization. It could be customer focus. So we want to improve customer experience. We want to improve our market reach. It could be compliance. So for instance, Data Protection Act, you want to comply with that. It could be compliance with an IFRS. It could be compliance with certain regulation in banking or insurance that requires certain data. So compliance might require certain data that you have. It could be a merger or an acquisition or capital raising event that requires the organization to collect data and share with the different stakeholders or even potential investors. It could be some project that is at risk, and that project requires you to generate data. So maybe you want to put up a solar power plant, you want to put up whatever it is, and you need data regarding markets, data regarding the economy, data regarding even the project itself. Like if it is solar, what are the sun rays? How strong are they? How many watts can it be able to give me? Such kind of things. If it is geothermal, you want to know seismic measures within the soil, within that pressure level. What are they? So different data for different projects. It could be overall decision making for anything. It could be for hiring people. It could be for optimal financial allocation. So whichever decision you want to make. It could be for admission of people within a certain institution. And sometimes you want data for operational efficiencies. I just spoke about sustainability reporting. If you think about sustainability reporting, it's just how do we ensure the triple bottom line by following our expenses, following our costs, monitoring how we engage with stakeholders and all those kind of issues to just improve operational efficiencies. This whole framework now enshrines the whole question of data governance together with data management. So the data governance has with it, what are the objectives? What are the guiding principles for our governance? Who will make decisions and how shall we allocate these decisions, and who will have those rights to those decisions? These will involve issues like people, process, and technology we need in place so that we can be able to have this data governance framework and manage our data, including the architecture, the metadata, what is the quality, how do we administer, for how long shall we keep it? So until or from the time we get this data to the time we dispose of it, for how long? What will that life cycle be? How shall we warehouse it? Okay, and how shall we use analytics to leverage on the warehousing so that we can get value? And how shall we use this master data or reference data for any other decision making so that we have a central point that has the reference data and people are nibbling off it as they make decisions? And how do we ensure protection and security? So you can see that everything we were seeing in our definition really was data management and not data governance, because data governance is looking at very strategic positions within the organization, all the way from the corporate drivers, enshrining the question of data in what you do within the organization. And you put in place solutions that will then leverage on this data governance. And those solutions include issues of what is the data quality? How do we integrate different pieces of data to make meaning? How do we prepare the data? And I know, unfortunately, we spend so much time preparing data as opposed to getting insights out of that data. And the reason will most likely be we haven't actually put a system or framework of things in place to ensure that the right quality of data is what we use and what we get. Reference data management, master data, data profiling, visualization, monitoring, and very many other aspects are included in this whole frame of data governance. So governance is actually managing you or enabling you determine your data management process and determine the solutions you want to leverage on this data. I can share this paper after this so that people can actually refer to it. It's a white paper written by SAS in terms of how to put together a data governance framework. So Christopher, just remind me after this so I can share with the participants and they can read more on this whole question of the different aspects of data governance. So for you to initiate data governance, you will typically have something, the traditional way, the way we know it is an organization structure. So call it a structure for data governance. And these will involve, you have maybe a central data management office, and I've defined the different roles of this office. So it is the one that will be in charge of data governance or data issues within the organization. However, the central data management office cannot be isolated. It needs to work with the domain subject. So it needs to work with HR, it needs to work with finance, it needs to work with accounting, it needs to work with manufacturing operations. So that we identify what are the key data points within the organization that we will collect together to add value. So you can have governance roles organized by data domains. And then an overarching body, call it the data council. You can use a different name if you wish, that then oversees. So it's like the board of directors that has an oversight over data. So you have the data council that is having oversight over this. And if the organization is bigger, you can then customize the way you wish. And these different areas, so like the data management office, so it defines policies. It is the one that empowers data leaders by educating them if there are any issues, offering training, telling them how to collect data, how to keep that data, and ensuring coordination and consistency across all functions within the organization. And linking, they provide huge linkage between the domain subjects, the domain fields, the different leaders within the organization and the data council or the oversight body within data frameworks. And then they provide support. So if you have issues around data, they will provide support, be it statistical, be it systems, be it IT related, they will provide support. That office is central. I know currently different organizations are now starting to put in place a dedicated office for data management, and this is important. However, if it's going to be within a data governance framework, you cannot set up this office and let them on their own. You need to have an oversight body, which we can call the Data Council now. And these are the guys that own the strategic direction and principles that will be proposed to the Data Management Office. So the Data Management Office cannot be left on its own. It will assign or define the different domains within the organization. What are the key areas of data that we need in this organization for us to get value from the data we have? It will confirm adherence to standards and policies, review progress on any initiatives you have, including funding for data and any other issues around data. It will resolve or escalate issues, and most of the time it will be chaired by the head of the Data Management Office. So here the key point is, if it is going to be governance, then it cannot only be data analysts seated somewhere. In fact, most of the time they're very junior, seated somewhere in an office, crunching numbers that sometimes don't make sense, and we leave them on their own. They need that governance or guidance from the highest position within the organization, call it the Data Council. Now, these two cannot work if you do not have domain leadership or domain leaders, head of finance, head of HR, head of manufacturing, head of operations that are actually generating this data. So they're the ones that are actually giving the strategy for the different domains. Okay, they understand and also know the use for the data. So they know the source of the data, they know the use. And because they're the consumers of that data at the end of the day, they're the consumers of the information. So yes, they generate, but also they use the information that comes out of it. They own and manage the data and help to improve that data quality as well. And finally, they could be co-opted in the Data Council, because being the leaders in the different areas within the organization, some of them could be co-opted in the Data Council. So 3 aspects of how you could go about setting the office or setting the whole data governance structure. So you have an apex, which is the Data Council. You have a dedicated resource or dedicated office, which we call Data Management Office, and then we have the leadership coming from the different domains. So there is a lot of coordination within the organization. So we avoid fragmentation. That's just putting them together. And if you want excellence, one is secure top management attention. If it doesn't excite the top management, it is most likely to fail. And the reason, like I've just mentioned something a few minutes ago, that most of the time you'll find data analysts are often junior, left on their own. People don't even understand what they do. And senior management are busy making decisions. You bring them numbers, they're like, I've never seen this within the organization. So secure top management attention and let them be interested in this, and integrate with primary transformation themes within the organization. So it could be the theme for the year is digitization. It could be the theme is resource efficiency or cost effectiveness. Data analysts should then be able to appreciate that what we need to support the organization to do is to meet this transformation theme they have during the year or the next 5 years. And therefore, if data governance is integrated to ensure that transformation is met, it is more likely to succeed. Priority is important so that we cannot probably or most likely use all the data in the world. We need to prioritize what are these data assets we think are extremely important for this organization. What helps a bank is not what helps an insurance company. What helps a regional bank does not probably sound important for a national bank. Maybe does not sound important for a global bank. So you need to prioritize what data assets you will leverage on, and then apply the right level of governance depending on the sophistication of the organization. At this point, I would like to mention the whole question of data and data science. If you think about it carefully, especially in business, it's more rampant in banks and financial institutions because of the regulatory requirement for compliance, including very specific laws and rules about how to share information, how to protect customers and all those. And so if you picked that framework and gave it maybe an SME or gave it a non-financial institution, then most likely you will get your governance levels wrong. Choose iterative and focused implementation. So it's not a linear way of doing things. Even the dichotomies Ferdinand is putting are not necessarily non-linear, or I mean linear. One of the things you will see or you will notice is organizations are small and vary in sizes. And because of that, even when we say a data management office, to one organization, it might be one person. To another, it might be a group of 20 people. To another, it could be a group of 100 people with different roles within that framework. So the question is to start so that you know where you're going, and even when you iterate and come back, change a few things here, you still are comfortable with the change. Like I said, it's a fluid conversation, and therefore it will keep changing as the environment changes. The data itself will change, the organizations will change, markets will change. And probably most importantly is generate excitement for data. Someone needs to mute. Okay, thank you. So excitement for data, and here is not just excitement anyhow. It is that people in fact use data for decision making. It is extremely important.
Ferdinand,
Yes.
just a moment, Ferdinand. I
Okay,
can
okay.
see Margaret Mbugu has raised her hand. I don't know. Margaret, you have something to say or a question? Margaret Mbugu. I can see your hand is up. You can unmute, then you share with us. Okay, maybe Ferdinand, you can continue. We can get back to her later.
Thank you. Yeah, so I was just saying we need to generate excitement for data where your leaders truly use data for decision making. It is not, I mean, data could be generated, but if you're not using it, it really doesn't help at all. We really need to excite people to do what I call data-driven decision making. So you have evidence that supports your decision. No longer can we make decisions based on gut feel. So have your facts right, have your data speaking, and when you present whatever you're looking for from senior management, top management, you know for sure what supports your decision. It's a difficult call, but I think it can be inculturated into people. So we stop this whole question of gut feel and feelings to make decisions, but temper that with some data and evidence that you get from history and going forward. The beauty is, given where we are at, and probably given even the economic situation due to COVID-19, we don't have a choice really but to use data and evidence. Where have we generated more value? Where have we gotten more customers? Where have we gotten newer markets? That is what is going to drive conversations going forward. It can no longer be gut feel. Where to start? I want to leave this to the end so that we can engage in some conversations around what I've just said. So where to start will be my last, and probably for now, I can stop sharing screen for now, and then we just have a conversation. So let's engage in this question of data governance. I don't know how many have tried to put it in the organizations, what has been the experience, and probably any clarification you need, any new thoughts you have. You can raise your hand, you can chat, so that we just have some time to engage before we finish this talk. So I think Marcella has a question there. Marcella, do you want to unmute and just speak to that question a bit more, and you add more meat to it? Marcella, can you hear me?
Good afternoon.
Thank you. Thank you. Go ahead.
Mine is not really a question, but I was just wondering, being an accountant, data governance has actually been the last thing on my mind. What do you think could be the problem causing this?
Okay. Maybe you have that's Marcella. You have actually two questions. The one you have spoken, and then the one you have actually typed. Let me start with the one you have asked. What could be causing the question of an accountant not knowing and not being very active or sensitive to the question of data governance? Now, think about it this way. I think the situation is changing very fast, that whatever we have been calling traditional domains are now very heavily driven by data. And let me go back and give you the example. When I started, I just mentioned before this call, I was on a call with one of my clients discussing issues of IFRS 9 conversations, expected credit loss. And one of the issues that quickly hit me at that time is there was a mix-up between data that belonged to a different group of trade receivables than the other. Now, you notice that if then we proceeded with the initial data I was given, we were nearly going to write off the company because the ECL, expected credit loss, was going to be a lot. Now, traditionally, issues of provisioning, especially for trade receivables, used to be issues of, sorry to say it, but gut feel. Or between these 0 and 30 days, we'll give 1%. Between 30 and 60, we'll give X%. But today, you notice that for me to generate that 1%, I need so much data in historically and then forecast it going forward, meaning that I only do not need data internally, I also need data externally. And coming with that, the question then becomes, shall we then continue manually generating these metrics over time, or shall we try and automate? So the question then becomes, this accountant who has been dealing with provisioning for trade receivables now needs to be very sensitive about statistics and data. You get me, Marcella?
Yes, I do. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Then the other question you raise is the whole question of ethics around data. When does it come in? And I like the fact that you're not talking about compliance, but the whole question of ethics. If you saw, I started about asking the question of what is the culture of the organization? And organization culture is a very personalized issue, using the person to mean the organization as a person. What do they believe in? How do people collate together? What is the tone at the top? What is the ethical dilemma that they face every other time? And I also went on to discuss issues of sustainability reporting. And when you're doing sustainability reporting, ethics is really key in that whole question. And so it cannot be that you are interested in the data itself, the processing, the technology and systems, and not the thinking and ethical dilemmas that will face you when you're using this data. For instance, customer identity protection. How are you going to deal with it? And if your data gives you a certain outcome that you don't like, because unlike statistics, data science is not hypothesized. So you don't even come in with a certain hypothesis. You come into data analysis or data science expecting to find anything. And so will you be forthright to accept what the data is telling you? And will you be forthright to even correct mistakes when you really dig into data? If you think about, for instance, insurance claims fraud, we have dealt with some data within insurance, and you find very interesting results, like a male person was claiming for pregnancy, and you wonder, okay, how did that happen? Was it fraudulent? Was it a mistake? And is the organization then willing, given the new discovery based on data analysis, are they willing to commit and go and change? we were faced with a very interesting dilemma, and probably this I can speak about. So students have been used to in-campus or on-campus exams. Now COVID-19 causes you to then administer online exams and even teach online. It then puts upon us the dilemma to check, are online exams giving us similar results with those ones that were off campus? I mean, on campus. And even, is the student experience the same? And therefore, you start engaging with very issues that touch on the ethics. And if the organization doesn't have that strong culture, then it supports acceptance. If there is a variance, then you realize you are in a very bad dilemma. So just examples of how using evidence, you can then put yourself either in an ethical dilemma, or if you have a culture and build a very strong organizational culture, you can actually deal with those dilemmas. So it's very central. Data itself, even before the advent of data science, data itself is subject to manipulation, is subject to bias, is subject to cooking. And so you really need a way to ensure that the organization follows through to ensure ethical outcomes. And then there's a question here that is asking, can you give the difference between a market analyst and data analyst? Does anyone want to take that question before I say something? Anyone from the participants? Okay, the way I will respond to it is this way. All market analysts will be data analysts, but not all data analysts are market analysts, because I could be a data analyst for health data. So I am checking HIV/AIDS prevalence, or I could be checking the prevalence of malaria within a certain organization. I am checking how COVID-19 has propagated. So I'm an analyst in a very different field. I could be an analyst for HR or market analytics. I'm trying to forecast demand. I'm trying to see which customers give us more sales, which one is. I could be an analyst using accounting data. So a market analyst is dealing with market data, but a data analyst can deal with any kind of data. And probably here I need to be a bit more categorical that it's extremely important that any aspiring data analyst has appreciation of the domain field they are dealing with, so that even when you get results out of your analysis, you can be able to explain. So if I'm an analyst based in banking, I need to appreciate banking really, really well. If I'm an analyst based in insurance, I need to know that domain called insurance. If I'm in health, I need to understand health. Otherwise, then your analysis is just noise. There is the question of, other than the Data Protection Act 2019, are there any specific laws? No, none as yet. So that is the only law we have currently. And wow, how does data governance differ from information governance? And how do we socialize this message across the enterprise if you have both initiatives active? And who is this? This is Samuel. Samuel, do you want to speak to that question?
That CPA, that is Margaret Mbugwa. Margaret, I don't know whether you
sorry.
can.
Oh, this is Margaret. Okay. Yes, Margaret. Do you want to speak about the question? Okay, maybe she may be having mic issues, but I just want to clarify the question. I'm imagining when you say information governance, I'm wondering whether you have intentionally left out the word information systems, because then that will be a subset of data governance. But if it is information governance, then I'm wondering why then you have both, because why you have data governance is so that you can get information from the data that you have. So the ultimate goal is getting information and insights. So unless what you mean here is information system governance, which will be a subset of data governance. But if it is data governance, then information governance, then I would have a lot of difficulties wondering why one would have both in an organization. But maybe we can chat a bit more. Okay, so you mean information governance? I am in a dilemma to see why it is both, or you have both, or you could have both in the same organization, because then information governance will be a bit higher than data governance, because it is the ultimate goal of what you have in data governance. But you ask an important question: how could you socialize this message across the enterprise if you have both initiatives active? First of all, I am in a dilemma why they are both, but let's assume you have one. Okay, you can use the words interchangeably. If you want to socialize across the organization, remember what we said. The big mistake we make is we start from the top and then we give some policies and frameworks down to people so they can apply them. Or we have some team of people that are actually called data analysts, and yet people don't understand what they do. Yet you need to integrate every domain within the organization that will benefit from this data governance. So it requires that you have an up down, but also a down up approach to governance, so that you're bringing in different executives, different leaders who are working with the different data management officers, and ultimately having a collecting body at the top that is dealing with core governance issues. And like I've said, given there's a very fluid subject, it also requires capacity building. It requires changing people's mindsets from ad hoc and gut feel kind of decision making to appreciating the work the analysts are doing to give you that data and information. So it's not going to be an event, like I've said. It's going to be a long process. It's going to be a culture issue. It's going to be a mind shift question that will probably take years to put in place. Very good. There is a question here. So there's a question on small companies may not be in a position to afford data governance structures. For instance, employing a data analyst. Okay. And now that the Data Protection Act is operational, what is the best way for small companies to remain compliant with data governance? Yeah, that's a good dilemma. And so that's why I'm saying if you look at the data governance framework suggested by SAS, it's not a question of really having a person called a data analyst. It is looking at what are my existing structures currently and where can I leverage on to really comply with the data governance. It could be adding a job description to someone within the organization. It could be then forcing you to employ, but I don't think the compliance bit will really mean creating a new position. What you should be doing is, of my existing structures, how can I reshape the job descriptions, reshape the systems integration within the company to then comply with this data requirement. So, and like I said, it will depend on the different governance complexities the organizations have and the different compliance requirements the organizations have. So just like any other regulation that has come into place, it is always good to ask yourself where we are at currently. Do we have capacity in-house? Can we reshape one of the analysts to become a data analyst or a data scientist? Or could it mean we can outsource some of these data analyst kind of role? So it will require a lot of iterations and thinking, especially using existing resources as opposed to always investing in new ones. Yeah, this is a good question. That what is the gap that exists between data governance and transparency? Okay. And based on your point on corporate board claiming that data is one of the key assets. Okay, let me start responding to that question or concern in reverse and say the board may not be claiming, or let's remove the word claiming. I think data is one of the biggest assets we're going to have in organizations going forward. And so the question then becomes, where do I strike a balance between governance and transparency? And if you think about it, or data governance and transparency, if you think about it, what data governance will be doing, because the question of transparency or whole question of data analysis and data insights is to give you value and information. This information is required by both stakeholders, internal and external. If you do not have good data and you don't have good governance structures in place, chances are you will either delay in your transparency or you will even not have what information to share with people. And so the whole question of data governance, in my view, is paramount to all the question. Sorry. The whole question of data governance is paramount to transparency. If you don't have good data governance, then you will really struggle having the whole transparency as is required. How will you start when executives think data governance isn't important, but metadata is? Who is this? I can't see the person who has posted the question. The name of the attendee. Is it still Movin or Margaret? Margaret still, she had mic issues. How will you start when executives think data governance isn't important? You will struggle with that. I can tell you, if we don't have buy-in from top management, it's very difficult. And that's why when I started, I said the whole question of governance will require to come from the top, where you have excited the top, then you have excited the whole question of data within the organization. So I don't know what the starting point will be if the top doesn't pick it. So in fact, that article I'm going to send you will tell you that you need to start all the way, excite the CEO first. And probably, okay, as I spoke, something came to mind. Start with the vision and direction the company is taking currently. Where do they want to go? If the organization wants to go towards cost effectiveness or wants to go towards digitization, if you spark a topic that is of interest to everyone within the organization, most likely you will push the conversation of data governance. Otherwise, people will not see why we need data governance. But it's very unfortunate that top executives can actually then think data governance ain't important. But for those of us who are in those roles, we need to, much as you're doing your work as a data analyst, you also need to pitch your work towards what the organization is headed, where the organization is headed. So very good. It is now 1:03. Maybe if there is no other question, I can walk through where do we start, which is the question that had just come up now. How do we start and where do we start? It will take me like 2 minutes. Okay, so and back to the question Margaret just raised, it is, I think, important for the executives to ask themselves, what is the opportunity cost of not getting data governance right? Okay, so what are we missing in the upside? The time lost by people cleaning data and even getting incorrect and suboptimal business decisions. What is the opportunity cost? Would we rather have it right or get it right, or would we rather continue doing it wrong? And who is leading these governance efforts today? That is the place that we should start. And how will it look like to elevate the conversation to the C-suite? And that's exactly the question that Margaret is asking. Who will you then put in the lobbying? Who will you involve in that conversation as you escalate this conversation up the organization? It's not going to be an easy conversation, but if you involve the right people and you've asked that first question, what's the opportunity cost? So we have shown the value we get from good governance, then maybe it will ease in the conversation with the executives. And where is governance most important? Which domains shall we then start focusing on? What are the pain points for the organization today? Is it HR we should be focusing on first? Is it the market we should be focusing on first? Is it finance we should be focusing on first? So if you get, I don't like using the phrase, but let me just use it, the low-hanging fruit in terms of the domains that need help urgently. If you hit those, then the conversation will be much, much easier. And what kind of governance structured will fit this organization? And this will be driven by many issues. What are the resource levels we have? What is the compliance requirement we have? What are the laws and regulations that require us to really comply with? Given that, we can then decide, will we have complex structures or will we have easier structures? And how can governance be accelerated by adjusting its focus and injecting iterative working concepts? How do we focus? How do we reshape our thinking about data governance? And this whole question goes towards or back to the question of priority areas. What are they? If we know them, then data governance will be quicker. And probably one of the big questions is, do you have in-house capabilities to manage such a shift? It will require people, it will require systems, it will require mind shifts, refocus of the culture and all those. Do we have capabilities or do we need capacity buildings? One of the things the data management office should be doing consistently is building buy-in for data governance and also capacity building for people, so that those ones who feel they don't have the prowess or the proficiency for data analyst or for data, they are actually elevated slowly, so they appreciate the value of data. And that is it from me. We're just saying data governance is critical to capturing value through analytics, digital, and other transformative opportunities. However, while many companies struggle to get it right, every company can succeed by shifting your mindset from thinking of data governance as just a set of frameworks and policies to embedding it strategically. So when you hit the strategy of the organization, chances are you will be more successful in data governance. Thank you very much. And yes, that brings me to the end of the conversation.
Okay, so thank you very much, Ferdinand, for that amazing presentation. And it's important that you've mentioned it's data governance is a fluid situation, and we can always have these discussions ever so often, not just once. And it calls for the need for capacity building continuously. So if we have any comments, would you like to project? Now would be a good time. Even appreciation for the good presentation and well-researched topic. You could share the same. Okay, so as we wait for those to stream in, we have the link for registration to the upcoming webinar. That is a value for money audit for effective organizational resource utilization. That you can find in the chat box and register immediately. Meanwhile, you can bring any question or concern or some good thing you have to tell us about data governance. Okay, it seems delegates are absorbing. We can see Samuel is saying thank you for the informative presentation. And on the screen, Simon's screen, you can see we have events lined up for you this February. You can make registration. Okay. So once again, Ferdinand, thank you for highlighting the steps towards achieving data governance prospects and why it has failed in the past. And I think having conversation around it like this brings more light into why the need for data governance and why the need for prioritizing it even now. Yes, so there being no any other concern or question, I'd like to close this session in the interest of time just by finalizing it with a prayer. Yes. Okay. Let's pray. Dear God, we come before you once again. We thank you for our able speaker's presentation. We thank you for the lessons we've learned. Give us the zeal and strength to implement them in our various capacities in our organizations. And as we depart to our other endeavors, protect us and let us be successful. Amen.